Mudbound, which is it's a Netflix release. It has also there is a theatrical opening as well. It's a 40 set drama set in Mississippi, co-written and directed by Dee Rees, adapted from the novel by Hilary Jordan. It's a very powerful and very poetic and very well-made piece of work. It's quite hard to take a clip from it that sort of sums up what the movie is like. The film, you hear voices from several characters. It's one of those films in which you see the film from loads of different perspectives. One of the key characters in it is Carey Mulligan as Laura. Here is a little bit of her voiceover.
Violence is part and parcel of country life. You're forever being assailed by dead things. Dead mice, dead rabbits, dead possums. You find them in the yard. You smell them rotting under the house. And then there are the creatures you kill for food. Chickens, hogs, deer, frogs, squirrels. Pluck, skin, disembowel, debone, fry. Eat, start again, kill. I learned how to stitch up a bleeding wound, load and fire a shotgun, reach into the womb of a heaving sow to deliver a breached piglet. My hands did these things, but I was never easy in my mind.
She's good.
She is, and I think weirdly that kind of sums up the strangely poetic tone of the film. So she's Laura, who marries Henry McCallum, played by Jason Clarke, despite the fact that actually she seems to be much more fired up by Garrett Hedlund's Jamie, who is kind of a much more glamorous brother. He's in Europe flying bombers in World War II. Henry buys a farm and starts working the land. That was what she was talking about. Whenever I think of the farm, I dream in brown, and I think of mud. And his paths cross with that of sharecroppers, Hap, played by Rob Morgan, and Florence, played by Mary J. Blige. And they have a son, Ronsel, who is also off fighting in Europe. So there are these two different family stories happening with kind of comparable, intertwining narratives. And what happens is that the stories interweave in and out of the personal and political conflict that occurs during the course of the narrative. Hap is very proud of his sharecropper status. His family have dreams of independence. But then as their son discovers, whilst he's away in Europe, that he says he was away fighting and, whilst he was in Europe being greeted by, cheers and crowds. But when he gets back to America, very, very little has changed. So they've defeated the Nazis, but he comes back to America. He comes back to Mississippi, where characters like Pappy McCallum, who is the father in the McCallum family, who is an old school racist bigot, represents a still powerful voice in Mississippi, and who, in his first encounter with Ronsel after he comes back, a war hero, is to not allow him to walk out of the front door of the local store, but insisting that he walks out the back door, saying things like, "I don't know what they let you do in Europe, but you're in Mississippi now, boy." And so the film, therefore, is a story about, a political story on the one hand and a personal story on the other hand, which finds the story of these two young men, both of whom go and fight, both of whom then come back to the home that they have left, and both find themselves discontented and outsiders in that world. There is a lovely conversation that they have at one point in which Jamie says, it sounds like a weird thing to say, but sometimes I wish I was back in the war. And the film is beautifully shot. I mean, it's a really beautiful film to look at. It's beautifully shot by Rachel Morrison, the cinematographer. As I said, it's a Netflix production, so an awful lot of people will see it on the small screen. I know now seeing things on a small screen is very different to what seeing things on a small screen used to be. But I have to say, I thought it was a film that really sort of demanded cinematic viewing. It has genuine sort of historical epic sweep. It has a brace of really good performances. I mean, it's very much an ensemble cast, and the cast are absolutely on point. But it also has this sense of poetry, this sense of, I mean, it feels like a cinematic film. It has that thing that properly made cinema has, that you get swept up in the poetry of the images, of the music, of the dialogue, of the choreography of what's happening on screen. There are scenes in it that are very distressing. There are scenes in it that are very tough and very grim and very violent, but there's also a real tenderness and lifeblood flowing all the way through it. I thought it was a very, very impressive piece of work. It's called Mudbound.